Good afternoon. Welcome to 15 Minutes with a Miramax Media Net Gallery production. Today, our 15 Minutes with is Amy Bloom, author of the upcoming book called White Houses. Amy Bloom is the author of Come to Me, a National Book Award finalist. She's been nominated for the National Book Critics Circle Award, and she has a number of other books that are just so fascinating, covers so many different topics. She's written for The New Yorker, The New York Times, Atlantic Monthly, Vogue, Slate, and just an overall wonderful writer, author, and also teacher, I'm told. You teach some courses?
Sure,
Yes.
I do.
Yes, so I'm happy to be here with you, Amy, and I got to looking at White Houses and got to read a preview of it. And my first question to you is, White Houses is a historical fiction piece, and it focuses on Eleanor Roosevelt and what some people have said is a common but uncommon secret about her relationship with a woman who had been a reporter for the Associated Press.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about why you chose that particular period in time. Why Eleanor Roosevelt, and why this relationship?
Well, Eleanor Roosevelt's a pretty great character and a pretty great figure. I think she is an impressive figure for a couple of reasons. One is having been a very scared, shy, prim young woman and young wife and young mother, she really transformed herself into a fearless leader, you know. This is the woman who quit the DAR because they were racist, who went to the South to face down Bull Connor and refused to sit on the white side of the auditorium. Famous for her relationships with everybody from the Supreme Court justices to, Polly Marshall, the firebrand.
Okay.
And I think somebody who learned her whole life. And in the 3,000 letters between her and Lorena Hickok, who was an AP reporter, who was also the first woman in America to have a byline in the New York Times, you see the development of a friendship and a passionate love affair and an enduring friendship. And there was something to me about the idea that this love story had been lost to history. I mean, really, actually, pretty actively cut out of history. Yeah. And also that they had almost been lost to each other. I mean, they had come together. I don't think it occurred to either one of them that they would fall in love. They fell in love. The love changed. The circumstances were not encouraging. But they persisted in loving each other and being friends for the rest of their lives, for another 30 years. And that combination really sort of pulled me in.
Yeah, you don't hear these kinds of stories about women of that time period.
Right.
You can read all of these biographies about her husband and the affairs that he had. But you never hear about the women's side of it. One of the most eye-opening books that I ever read, and I never considered it, was a book about the life of Bessie Smith and how she'd had relationships with women, even though she'd been married. And it was something that, people never kind of spoke about at the time. So did you find that in your research for this book that the information was hard to come by?
It was hard to come by, but it wasn't impossible, just like with Bessie Smith, just like with Ethel Waters. I think that part of it is that all of us tend to feel that history, just happened. And so, obviously 1945 was 1,000 years ago when dinosaurs roamed the earth and clearly lesbians had not been invented yet. It's like, that's not actually how people are. People have been people with a sort of wide bouquet of sexuality for thousands of years. There's nothing new there. What's new now is it is less of a secret, and that we have a better understanding of the fact that this is pretty much what the human garden looks like, people. It does not only come in blue and pink.
Right.
And so what was striking to me was the passion in their letters. Also, I have to say, to hold the actual letters from, 1940 or 1932 was wonderful.
Right.
And they are unmistakably love letters. And I understand that when those letters were first discovered by historians, there was a great rush by mainstream historians to be like, no, it looks like this, but it's not really like this. She was just a Victorian lady, and she was so effusive in her language. And you're like, no, because as close as I am to my girlfriends, I have never said to them, I long to be in your arms and kiss the southeast corner of your mouth. Right. No, that is not what I say to my pals. And there are the letters. And I think it broke up the narrative that we like about American history, and particularly about Franklin Roosevelt, who was a great president. Right. Maybe not a perfect man by any means, but a great president. And the narrative of American history is they fell in love. He was amazing. She adored him. He broke her heart by sleeping with her secretary and having a big affair. She discovered the letters. She offered him a divorce. He didn't take it, not because he was so brave or loved her so much, but because his mother said she would cut off his funds if he got divorced, and that would be the end of his life in politics. And he goes on to become president and a great man. And Eleanor takes her broken heart and becomes a saint and does good deeds. And that's sort of the standard American history story. But I think for a lot of people who are Franklin Roosevelt fans, if you change the story and say, well, yeah, he did break her heart, and then 10 years later, she fell in love again with a woman. And it was passionate and physical and wonderful, and it changed her life and the way she saw herself. That's a different kind of story.
Yeah. And isn't this, isn't this like something that we're seeing happen with even not just historical fiction, but even just historically based books? We're seeing this trend that now where you used to have history books that wrote about people, like even people like Martin Luther King, and they had these very pristine stories about them. Now we're kind of we see the incorporation of their faults and being able to separate the person's deeds versus who the person was behind closed doors, and acknowledging that, these people that we admire, they may have done great things, but they were human.
They were human, and they were not only human, they were often deeply flawed humans, which does not change the contribution that they made. And it's a very tricky thing. It's striking when we look at the biographies of great, great people whom we admired, especially as Americans. I would think, people who changed the course of this country. Somebody like Dr. Martin Luther King, somebody like Franklin Roosevelt. These are people who made our country different than it would have been without them. But the other side of Me Too is that nothing stays behind closed doors forever. And once that snowball starts rolling down the hill, it's going to pick up some traction.
Yeah. In this book, it's about this relationship, but it's told from the standpoint and the viewpoint of the companion, Lorena, is it Hickok?
Yes.
Hickok. Lorena Hickok, who was the writer. And she herself, you tell this story of a very troubled background and all kinds of abuse and things happening, very terrible childhood, but she becomes successful, and then she actually ends up for someone who didn't really have a whole lot of love. And I think that the description in your book was that she was kind of like a lost soul. She ends up finding someone else who's equally lost, but actually finding love that she never had in her early life.
Absolutely. I loved Lorena as the narrator, first of all, because she's a straight talker. Mm-hmm. She's not a lady like Eleanor, As she says, she will forever be identified with servants. because that's how she made a living.
Right.
And so the difference between her and the Roosevelts and the gulf in terms of class and background is enormous. And I like the fact that, Lorena calls it like it is. She says, oh, yeah, it's, whether you're rich or poor, it's really tough to struggle with your demons. But you know what? It's easier if you're rich.
Yeah, and you see this kind of connection where in certain ways, Eleanor Roosevelt is a woman of class,
Mm-hmm.
and Lorena kind of brings her down to her level, and Eleanor loves it. She loves that.
Eleanor loves the wheel. She loves the straight talk most of the time. But, Eleanor is somebody who lived, on one hand, her own very difficult childhood. She had an alcoholic father who died young. She had a mother who died young who was also extremely narcissistic and unsupportive and used to make fun of Eleanor as a little girl for being too plain and too serious. I mean, these are heartbreaking stories. But also, it's a story of tremendous privilege. And one of the things that's amazing about Eleanor Roosevelt is her capacity to have not only interest, but real empathy for people whose lives were different than hers.
Mm-hmm.
She did not take the stance that she was lucky and that made her better. She took the stance that everybody deserved respect, everybody deserved attention, everybody had rights. And when she, later in her life, helped create the Declaration of Universal Human Rights, she said that was what she had been put on earth to do, to say that everybody is entitled to a home, to safety, to food, and to respect.
Last question. What do you want people to take from this book after they read it? What do you want them to take from it about relationships, about life, about love, and about Eleanor Roosevelt in particular?
I think the first thing I always want is I want them to be sorry that the book is over. I want them to feel as if they have entered this world and been in this world with Eleanor and Lorena and FDR and World War II, and that they have been in a whole world and walked through it with these characters. After that, I hope that they will feel that the world is a little bigger for them, that they see things they didn't see, that they've gotten to experience this passionate love affair and friendship, and also a very interesting triangle, and that stays with them, that the people stay with them.
Beautiful. So the book comes out when?
The book comes out February 13th.
Great. February 13th. That's a Tuesday. In 2 weeks, right?
It is, as the publishers would want you to notice, the day before Valentine's Day.
Ah, beautiful. Love story right in time for Valentine's Day, right?
That's,
and people can actually go and pre-order the book.
Oh, sure.
Excellent.
Yes, we're wildly enthusiastic about their pre-ordering, for sure.
Great. So we'll make sure we have a link on our site for people to go and pre-order. And again, this is Amy Bloom. The book is White Houses. It will be out February 13th, the day before Valentine's Day. Go pick it up. It's great. And thank you so much, Amy, for chatting with us today.
My pleasure. Glad to be with you.
Okay.